So this next section, or chapter 4, is all about entering Effies effectively. No pun intended. So I think this is really where our panelists are going to share with us their tips. They're all about how, entering an Effie is about good storytelling, really working hard to make your case and joining the dots throughout the 4 sections. So I'm going to start this with Neil, who has probably sat in more jury rooms and read more cases than any of us.
All over the world. There's a woman on the team, a colleague of mine in New York called Erica Stoppenbach.
Yeah.
And Erica used to say that there's this great misnomer that you can have, reasonable results, and as long as you can write really, really well, you'll get a trophy at the end.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And she said that's actually quite unlikely. What is more likely is you having a really good case and writing so badly that the judges can't figure it out for themselves when they're reading the case. And with that in mind, there are kind of 4 things that I always watch out for and recommend to any of my team who are writing cases now. The first one is, really, really simply, remember that judges are human. Mm-hmm. And they are going to be in a room or reading dozens of cases, and they can all blur into one. Mm-hmm. Make sure, as the author of the case, that you make yours stand out. So that's the first one, the first tip. The second one is, don't just start writing. Figure out the executive summary for each of the 4 sections in your head. Craft your argument, then write the case that meets the argument. Mm. Each of the 4 sections, one at a time, write a little tweet about that. Don't just sit down and start filling it in, because then you're going to write yourself out of success, as Erica would have said. The third one is actually time. Give yourself enough time to actually be able to give your case to other people who've got nothing to do with it. Might be your partner, might be somebody in another department, just to read it and see, does this make sense? Do you understand what it is I'm trying to tell you? Because as marketing people, we can always add in too much jargon, or sometimes actually just lose that golden thread that we need. So give yourself enough time to find somebody else to read it and see if it makes sense. Really, really simple thing. And the last one is a word that we've probably used a lot today, which is context. Mm. You might say, and this achieved 2% growth, and the judge might say, you haven't told me why that 2% is really valuable. What does that translate to, perhaps, in dollars? What does that mean? Why is that important? So context is always a big thing for me.
Yeah, and I hear that more and more as I sit in on jury rooms as well. And so what's the best practice for presenting category for specific insights? If you're entering particularly multi-market, which you would if you're entering Effie Europe, and even when you're entering best of the best, you have to adapt your case so that international judges can understand. So how would you do that? How would you apply, if you're giving it to somebody to read, is it going to be somebody from a different market completely, to your grandmother or your mother? What's the sort of rule of thumb, really?
It's not that dissimilar to the audience information that we might have on a creative brief.
Yeah.
That a strategist's crafted. Here's what you need to know about your audience. Well, in this particular occasion, the audience is a judge, and they're sitting in a room in Berlin, or they're sitting in a room in Brussels, and here's what you need to do to get into mindset. And write the case to your audience, much in the same ways that we craft creative with an audience in mind. Judges are humans too.
Okay, lovely. And what about making the entry stand out without resorting to gimmicks? Because you know what we're all like in this industry. We like...
I think that's right. I mean, gimmicks should be avoided at all costs. To my mind, it's about simplicity of the language you use and the clarity of the thoughts that you put in there.
Okay. And Claire, so... and in your world, presumably, you've got to involve the entire team as well within Lego if you're creating a case, and your external agencies.
Yeah. I think just writing a paper takes a bit of a team. I know ultimately the strategist is probably the author of it, but it does take a team because you need people who are going to help you with the data, and you need to think about the data up front as well. Like we talked earlier on about, don't just think about Effies when it comes to award seasons. When you're actually setting off with your objectives, what was the data to start with that then you can measure at the end? That's often the big miss for everybody. So it does take a team. You know, your creatives pulling great videos together is the first thing. And I think the second thing is, and I've seen it many times judging, is that I call it the red thread, the story. It disappears, and you're thinking and you're writing in sections, and you're answering the question. And you start with your objective, and then by the time you get to the results, you've lost your story. And I've seen great papers as well have results sections where they're just giving tons of results, but not necessarily the result that they began with. Yeah. So you lose track of the story. There's some incredible results they've got, but it's like, but you never set out to do all of that. So these are just superfluous to need, not simple. And you've lost me. So I think like a simple red thread storyline and a team are my two big things.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Luella?
I was just going to build on that and say sometimes it feels like you can tell that a specific section has been handed off to a different type of thinker. So that's where the story breaks. So yeah, I would obviously agree with those, but also talk about clarity of the metrics, making sure, yeah, you're delivering against what you said up front. I don't mind a bit of a pun or an anecdote to, you know, keep it exciting. And I think, you know, roping in different members of the team, junior members of the team, to explore the kind of criteria, explore the case and help draft it. It's a great learning opportunity, but also a great opportunity to remind everyone above you of the great work that was done and get more eyes on it, because, you know, more eyes, more critical thinking, and you don't know how many cases are being reviewed. So if you're serious about winning, yeah, for everything.
And do you think, and what's the best approach? Because a lot of the time, you know, one person in an agency is renowned for writing brilliant cases and you know, has got loads of goals under their belt, and then they become the go-to person. But then everyone else in the agency is sort of, you know, let off the hook, as it were. So, you know, would your advice be bring in, as you said, Luella, bring in loads and loads of team members, however junior, from the start, so as they progress throughout their career, they can take charge of the whole case?
Yeah, I think, you know, it shouldn't. It's easy for lots of things to fall on the strategy team, but it's absolutely should be shared. And if you do have an effectiveness culture, then other people are, you know, more able to and more willing to get involved, because, you know, we all get celebrated for a great case. So
yeah.
And mentoring as well. If you've got somebody who's like the supersonic star, how do you build a mentor culture? So he is imparting his wisdom to
or her
wisdom to other members of the department and team. So how do you build kind of that culture of learning that discipline as well?
Yeah.
Which is part of an effectiveness culture, rather than having an effective individual.
An effective individual, exactly.
But team alignment, which is what you've all talked about.
Yeah.
That whole clarity of purpose. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's for a campaign or whether it's for your own business and where it's going. If the team don't know where they're going, how can they, you know, get on the journey with you?
Yeah.
Or join you on the journey, as it were. And junior members of the team, I think, are really, really critical. So you talked about mentoring. There are some jurors, and we're looking at it ourselves this year in Effie Europe, where we allow junior members to sit in to listen to the jurors. And I think that's a brilliant, we talked about this in the steering group, I think that's a brilliant way for young people to understand how jury members think. To be honest, I'd love all strategists to sit in, but they can't, because it'll be their cases being discussed. But I do think that's a really great way of learning. I just want to also touch on multi-markets, and I might turn to you for this, Neil. Multi-markets is an interesting one, because we've seen a decline in multi-market entries across Europe. And in many ways it's because agencies responsible for, say, the Belgian market or the German market aren't the same agencies that are working in the French market. So So how can we encourage the kind of, I suppose, the client marketeers to coordinate efforts? I mean, what would you say to the senior marketeers about that? Because some of the great work that happens across Europe isn't being recognised.
I think from the single point of view, it's a very difficult award to win.
Yeah.
You've really got to have done a lot of work
Yeah.
to actually be able to enter, let alone to actually craft an entry that gets you there. So I think being able to talk to client-side marketers and saying, what you do is a really difficult job, and we're here to help you celebrate that. I think that might be a useful opening gambit.
Yeah.
And then you get into the nuance of how you, going back to context, allow a judge to understand why this fact was important in the Romanian part of the campaign, but not in the Belgian part of the campaign, or whatever is important. But it is a very difficult category. Same with the global entries as well, the multi-market ones. And just allowing clients to understand that this is the pinnacle of your career. You should be able to celebrate it.
Yeah. And do you find, just one final point on this sort of, I suppose, client marketeer and their mindset, do you find that in Dentsu more and more of your clients are looking to you to put their campaigns into Effie's, or do you have to go to them to start with? How does it work now?
Yeah, I mean, different clients have different appetites. I think there's generally an increasing, understanding of Effie's and, importance placed on them. So, yes, I would say there's more than there has been. Yeah.
And play the long game as well. So
Yes.
one of the best ways to actually get people to enter is to invite them to be judges. So if you ever have clients who are saying, I'm not so sure, get them in a judging room, because they usually come out going, oh my God, we're entering next year.
And one final point for you, Claire, in terms of the sort of managing upwards within a brand as big as Lego, how important are Effie's to the upper echelons, as it were?
I mean, as I said, when I got there, creative effectiveness wasn't really embedded into Lego, so it's a journey. It's a journey, and we're thinking, as I was talking about earlier on, about effectiveness and different metrics, and looking at the power of the brand. So I think it's all a journey, but we're beginning to get into the creative effectiveness specific area now. So watch this space.
What are the cases that you've particularly been drawn to from the Effie Awards Europe winners last year?
There's another great one, Dagoma Toys Rescue. I wasn't a judge on that one. Again, I would say it's a surprising, because it's a category that you think is very sort of not very interesting as a category, but how they then found a really interesting insight, which was a bit of a leap, and then got you to an interesting idea, I thought was very smart. So I just think, again, it's about smart insight, really create a good creative innovation, good papers, interesting papers.
After identifying the most commonly lost or broken parts of the best-selling toys of the last 40 years, a team of 3D designers modeled and recreated them with the help of a 3D scanner. Arms, legs, wheels, heads. Over 100 printable parts have been designed, and others are still being modeled. To make sure they work, each part has been printed and attached to broken toys. All parts are available for free on toyrescue.com. Anyone can simply go on the platform, find the part needed, download it, and print it. If a part is unavailable, The platform is collaborative, so just ask for it, and the Dagoma Makers community will create the 3D file.
We established a social community of makers. These makers have a 3D printer at home and can print parts for others.
Et donc c'est une start-up qui s'appelle Dagoma.
Tu as donc remédié à ce manque grâce à l'impression 3D.
C'est une belle initiative et ça pourrait éviter de jeter des milliers et des milliers de jouets.
Elle s'appelle Toy Rescue, il y a un site internet.
C'est une très belle initiative. Toy Rescue.
We were contacted by major toy companies. With them, we are now developing repair solution in store and working to include their toys on the Toy Rescue platform.